Hi and welcome to Dev Pointers. Today I'm going to show you how to make HTTP REST calls from Visual Studio Code. So now you may have a lot of options to make REST calls, right? You can make it through a browser, you can do it through Postman, or as simple as a curl command. But if you are using an IDE like Visual Studio Code and you don't want to switch between different tools and want to make calls from Visual Studio Code itself, this video is for you. So today we are going to cover mainly three things. The first one is REST client for Visual Studio Code. Basically, it's an extension. We'll make some REST calls, and then we will configure the environment, to make the REST calls. So basically, if you have, dev, QA, and prod environments, and you want to change some values in the API calls, we'll configure that as part of that. So let's begin. I have created some sample APIs to test it out from the Visual Studio Code. So this is the representation. I have two get APIs. One is for dev, one is for QA, and then a simple put API for a sample weather forecast. All right. So the first step is to open your Visual Studio Code and go to the extensions and search for REST client. So you'll see a big list of REST client that are available for Visual Studio Code. I usually go with this one, which is the REST client by Uchayu Mayo, and I've already installed this. If you don't see install on your machine, you can just click here and install, and you'll be good to go. On this page, you can also see all sort of documentation here, which is very helpful. It will get you started how to make a simple HTTP call and whatnot. For example, here if you see it's trying to make a post call, and it has several attributes here: content type header, and this is the body. So since I've already installed this REST client, I will move straight away to the HTTP calls. So I have a bunch of files here. So after you have installed the extension, what you have to do is you have to create a HTTP file, basically a file with .http extension. That's how Visual Studio Code knows that this is a file that links to that REST API extension. I have added 4 API calls here. These are all local APIs that are running on my machine. So you can see we have one get for weather forecast, and it depicts dev environment. Then I have the similar API for QA. I've added one put command for the weather forecast, and then a put command for a different variation. So let me go over the structure of this file. If you look at here, as soon as you write HTTP method get post or whatnot, it will add this link to send a request. That's how Visual Studio Code helps you out here, right? You don't have to click any button like separately. It's just in the file itself. So if I send a request, you see, it actually gets me all this weather data. And you can see the source here is dev. This is just for the demonstration purpose. If you do this one, it will give you source as QA. Now that's the very simple API call that we are making here. If you have to make multiple API calls in the same file, how you do that is you have to separate them out by using these hash symbols, 3 hash symbols. So if I don't do that, you see that button is gone. The send request button is not coming up for this API call. So that's a qualifier that you have to put so that the Visual Studio extension knows and it adds these links accordingly. You can also add a bunch of headers. In this case, you see this content type as application/json, right? So you can add, for example, if your API is expecting some key, right? So you can always write key and do this. So all the headers goes down here just after this API call line, and you can add as many headers you want. After your headers are done, you have to leave one blank line and you can add the body. This is the body for the API call, but there has to be a blank line between the last header and the body. Other way of doing this, like if you want to pass a body, sometimes it could be a large JSON payload, right? Or an XML payload, right? Whatnot. So for that, what you can do is you can take this entire payload, put into a file, and then pass that file as an input for the body. So in my case, if you look at this body.json, I've added the exact same payload here, and I'm taking this as an input. So I'll post all these sample files, in the description of the video, so you don't have to write it down at this point. And just to try all these API calls, if I send a put request, you can see there's success, and here it is QA. So it is QA here. Now from the file, in the file it is actually dev, just to make sure that this file is actually working for us. I send request, it is dev. So that's how you make HTTP calls. Pretty straightforward, pretty simple. The structure is simple, and if you need like help from that for some advanced things here, you can always go to the extension page here, and there is all these features and documentation that is listed down here. All right. The next step here is to do some configurations with respect to the environments. So if you look at this file, you can see a lot of repetitions here. Like you see the base URL, you have to write it down every time you have to make an API call. The content type is being repeated. So we can get rid of that, and also get these values, based on the environments. So for example, this dev and QA is the only difference between these two API calls, right? So what if we have one line here for both dev and QA, and we can configure based on the environment, where the call goes. So as soon as you open your HTTP file, you see here you can select an environment. And right now I've selected no environment. If you look at the bottom of the Visual Studio Code here at the taskbar, you can see right now it says no environment. So let's configure that environment, add some parameters, and use that parameters here. And then based on what environments we select, the parameter values will actually be applied to these API calls. So to do that, we have to open the command palette. So Control Shift P will open up the palette. Look for settings. Basically this one, open settings, JSON file. And in here, I've already added, baseline configuration for the REST client. I'll post that in the description of the YouTube video. So basically, you can have all your environments defined here. So I have defined 3 environments. One is shared, which means that it is shared. The parameters inside this will be shared across different calls. You have dev and you have QA. Now we saw that the base URL is actually same across, right? So that means it is shared across all the environments for now. So what I'll do is I'll add another variable here with this base URL. We don't need host here because it's not changing by the environment. What we can do is we can add another environment variable called qualifier, and for dev it will be dev, For QA, it will be QA. And we have also added content type header, which is also shared across different environments, right? Control S. Going back to our file. Now what we can do is we can go here, change the base URL to this. So your environment variable has to be in the double curly braces. And here you will see if you look at this, why it is not suggesting, because we haven't selected any environment, right? No environment basically suggests you whatever you have in the shared environment. So what we can do is we can still write qualifier here. So make sure the spelling is right. In fact, what you can do is you can also add it here just to say that, okay, the default qualifier is, let's say, div. Okay. Going back here, qualifier. So now we don't have to have this call separately. Okay, we'll show you in a bit. Same thing here. Don't need this. It's just host. Same thing here. We don't need this. And also for the content type, you don't need to write application JSON every time. You can just do content type. Same thing here. All right. So we are good to go. Now, since we have selected no environment currently, what will happen is it will apply the settings from the shared environment. So if I send a request now, you see, same thing. So it's called the dev because in the share, the qualifier is dev, right? Now what we'll do is we'll select the environments. For that, just click on switch rest client environment at the bottom, and you can select the environment. So if I do dev, now if I do a send request, again, you see it's the same source, dev. Can go to this one. It is calling it fine. It's calling this put command fine. Now we don't need this one because we are using the qualifier. Now if I go here, if you see and switch the environment again, let's say to QA, and now if I send a request, you see it made a call to the QA environment. So there are other configurations that you can do, but in this video I just wanted to touch base on basic simple scenarios, making a simple call, HTTP REST client call, and setting up some parameters so that you avoid repetition, and you don't have to um, add separate calls for different environments. And now it's pretty easy. Like you can share, this file, this HTTP file with any of your team members, and you can also share the settings, whatever settings you want to share. You may not want to share all the settings because it could have like the API keys and whatnot, some sensitive information. But yeah, it's pretty straightforward and simple, and it's from the same IDE that you use for your development. So thank you for watching the video.